A very warm welcome to today's ORDI's Care for Rare webinar series. Today, it's pleasant because we are on our 21st series of 21st session of the entire series. And the primary objective of the webinar series is to create awareness through informative sessions and to reach out and beyond for the overall benefit of the rare disease community in India. Today with us, we have Dr. Rajni Bhattu, who is the founder medical director of Center for Eye Genetics and Research, Bangalore. She will be touching upon the current status of genetic diseases of the retina. Dr. Bhattu, on to you, please.
Okay.
Ma'am?
Yes.
Hi.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I think a lot of you will see me as Ashwini. That's because I'm connected through my daughter's laptop. Unfortunately, my Mac refused to work, use the WebEx. I see a lot of, familiar names here. So good evening to everyone. And good evening to, first of all, Prasanna, Swapna, and Swami. I think they've been doing a wonderful job for, people with rare diseases. So like they mentioned, this is their 21st talk in the series. So, and I think that's, of course, this is the first one, in the eye. So this is meant almost totally for, patients and caregivers. In this, you'll have to excuse me because this is meant for, patients and caregivers. Shall I start my presentation?
Yes, madam.
Yeah. So I think I'll go ahead. The presentation should take maybe about 25-30 minutes. Probably, I'm not sure. Swami probably is going to moderate. So once that's done, I think we'll take up the questions. Is my presentation visible and am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, you are audible and the presentation is visible.
All right, yeah. So good evening, everyone. This is, like I said, a talk on genetic diseases of the retina specifically. Although there are a lot of genetic diseases of the eye, including the cornea and so on, I'm going to restrict myself to the retinal diseases because honestly, I don't know much about the others. All right. So we're going to just start with looking at how the normal eye functions. So when you look at yourself in the mirror, this is how the eye appears. The white portion of the eye is the sclera. So the cornea is actually a clear layer that is in front of the is the iris. So most of us in India have, a dark brown iris, and the pupil is a small opening in the eye that allows light to go through. So when you take a cross section of the eye, this is how the eye appears. The front of the eye has the cornea and the lens. Some of you may have heard of cataract. So the lens, when it becomes opaque, it's called a cataract. So that's the front of the eye. The back of the eye is this portion that contains the cavity of the eye. That's, sorry. Did someone say something? Okay, so the cavity of the eye is filled with a jelly called the vitreous, and there's a layer that lines the wall from within, and that's the retina. So this is the most important layer that we are talking about, and that's the optic nerve. So typically when we look at anything, light comes through the structures from the front of the eye and forms an image on the retina at an area called the macula. So from here through the optic nerve directly to the brain. This is how the eye functions in a very simplistic way. When we look now, so this entire area is the retina. And the roundish structure here, the round pink structure here is called the optic nerve. Cross section, remember, the circular area. Now, that's a picture of the macula and the optic nerve. That's the macula and the optic nerve. So remember, this macula here, in reality, is only a structure that's about 6 millimeters overall in size, 6 millimeters square. So if you can think of 6 millimeters in a scale, that's how small that macula is. The most important part of that is actually only central 3 millimeters. If anything that happens on the central 3 millimeters, our vision will certainly decrease. So the retina itself is a very, very complex structure. So it has these 10 layers that we see histologically. That means if you take a section of the retina and put under the microscope, we see 10 layers. And so this is a schematic diagram of the some of the important layers. So these are the ones in So these are what we call photoreceptors. They help mostly in night vision, while cone cells help in day vision, visual acuity, color vision, and so on is through the cones. So both these layers are supported by this single layer of cells called the retinal pigment epithelium. So, we're going to talk a lot about these two. So remember that photoreceptors are the rods and cones and the retinal pigment epithelium. So a lot of you may have undergone tests into something called OCT, and ocular coherence tomography, and so on. So what we do there is to look at a scan that goes through the macula. The reason I'm bringing this here is to show you the 10 layers of the retina again. Now, the OCT is similar to a CT scan of the brain. So this is how a normal OCT would appear. Now, there are actually 10 layers here that we can make out. The most important are these of the photo. So this is the layer of the photoreceptor. If you notice this white line, the middle bright white line extends through the entire macula. So that's the layer of photoreceptors or the rods and cones. And the layer beneath that, the next white layer, is a layer of retinal pigment epithelium. So these are two structures that get damaged in most patients with retinal dystrophies, and that's why this becomes important. We've all heard these are genetic diseases. So what are the genes? What are the DNA that we talk about? You've heard of mutations. What are mutations? So every single cell in the human body contains the central nucleus, within which is the genetic material called the chromosome, and then the DNA. So the DNA, if you actually look at it again, in greater detail, is basically it's got two arms that intertwine with what are called nucleotides. Now, these colored rods that you see are called nucleotides. Each of them have a very specific function. So there are basically our entire human body is made up of a collection of 4 different nucleotides in the DNA. Now, this would be the normal DNA. And when we talk about these nucleotides, these are like the spellings that form the alphabets. So a collection of these nucleotides will form a protein, and a protein will then help in every single function of the human body, including the retinal function. So when there is a change in this nucleotide, for example, in this here, instead of it being a T, it has become A. Basically, it's a collection of A, T, C, G, which is millions of combinations throughout the entire human body. When one of those get replaced by a different one, that is now called a mutation. Now, if we test each one of us, if we do a genetic testing for each one of us have thousands of mutations, but not every single mutation is clinically relevant. Some of these mutations that may be alter the function of the protein in terms of either they change this function, they change the structure of the protein, or do not help with the complete formation of the protein. So these are mutations that become clinically relevant. All right. So again, go back to this. This is what we. Sorry, can I just ask everyone else to mute? There is some background noise that's continuously happening. Swami, can you just mute everyone else? Is that possible?
Ma'am, we are doing it.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Yeah. So this is, we go back to this. I was talking to you about mutations and the rods and cones. Now, this is actually a structure of the rods and cones and the pigment epithelium alone. If you look at all of these spellings that you see here, all of these actually depict a certain mutation that, if there is a problem, can cause a retinal dystrophy. In the entire human body, most of the mutations occur in the retina, unfortunately. So there are many mutations that cause retinal dystrophies. So, for example, one of the commonest that we see is called retinitis pigmentosa. As of today, retinitis pigmentosa alone is caused by nearly 65 to 68 mutations. That means each of these mutations that we see here is the gene that has a mutation, and there can be hundreds of mutations in each. So, we've generally heard that a lot of these conditions are heritable. They can get passed from one generation to the other. So what is it? What is it that we talk about as heredity? So we all have certain traits. I have, I'm average heighted. I have dark brown eyes. So these are all traits that get passed from one generation to another. Okay. So single functioning of the human body is a trait. So the way we look, how our bodies, function. For example, all of us are, most of us are dark brown eyed. This is all traits that are passed from one generation to another. Okay. So you've also seen some of these charts that we draw in a clinic. So these are called pedigree charts. This is how we keep a tab of how these traits are passed from one generation to another. So this is a classical pedigree that we draw to say how has a person gotten affected. Okay, I'm not going to go into the details of that. Now, the reason why we talk about traits is there are different ways these traits get inherited. There are some of those that are called dominant traits. There are some of those that are recessive traits that are also neither. And there's some that actually get expressed on the X chromosome, and that's an X-linked trait. So what is a dominant trait? Now, there are some families where there is someone who, for example, every single person in the family has dark brown, hair, dark brown eyes. These are dominant traits. Most of us are right-handed. These are dominant traits. That means this trait is expressed in almost every person in a single generation. So that means there are every generation has traits. So these are called dominant traits. Now, recessive traits are those where people may not express it in a generation at all, whereas the next, trait, next generation someone expresses. These are called recessive traits. Let's explain this in a little detail. Example. Now, this is an affected parent. He or she has one affected. So that is a mutation in this parent, and because there is one affected and one normal, this person still carries the disease, whereas this other parent has normal genes at this point. So when two such people have a child, so we do not have a control over which gene or which chromosome we give to each of our children. So this parent, for example, can give either this or this. Similarly, this parent can give this or this. That means this now comes into 4 combinations. So if this parent gets a combination of this, there is some continuous talking. Please. And similarly, if with this and this you get this, now there's only 2 chances that children get one of these orange or the affected gene, and therefore this child now gets the disease. Okay, so now these are dominant traits. That means even if there's only one copy and the other copy is actually normal and functioning, still this person actually manifests the disease. So this is now a dominant mutation. Okay, now let's look at something like this. Here we have 2 parents. Both of them carry a copy that is affected, whereas the other one is normal. Although both themselves do not carry the disease at all. Okay, so that means both of these are called carrier parents. So they themselves would have no idea that they're carrying a mutation. In fact, this is what is going to happen to many of us. Like I said, when we test, most of us, all of us carry some mutations. They're all going to be a single copy, whereas since we have a second copy that is normal, we never manifest the condition. Now let's look at what happens when they have a children. So if there's a combination of this and this child now has both the copies. On the other hand, the next 2 children, this is now we're talking about, when we talk about 1 in 4, let me get to that. Okay, so now this child can have both normal. Now remember, this is something where the parent has had one copy but does not manifest the disease, and therefore both these children will never manifest the disease. They are carriers. And this is also a normal child, but with who's carrier at all. That means in every pregnancy, there is a 1 in 4 chance that there is a child that can be affected. Now, a question that's often asked is, if I have, for example, both parents are carriers and there is one child that is affected, they already have one. Does that mean that the next child that they have is going to be normal because they already have a child who is not affected? No. Every pregnancy has a 1 in 4 chance of having an affected child. So this is a recessive inheritance. Now, this is important because majority of the retinal dystrophies that we see in India are all recessive. Okay, so that's about the inheritance. Now let's talk a little about a couple of the common conditions that we see. Now, how common are these? One of the common questions that I'm asked is, doctor, I'd never heard of something like this, till you told me that I have this problem, or till we heard that someone in our family has this problem. Is it so rare that there's no one else who's affected? Unfortunately, it's not true. For example, one of the commonest diseases called retinitis pigmentosa, the prevalence. So when we talk about prevalence rate, that means what is the possibility that someone in the normal population has the condition. Okay, these are called prevalence rates. So typically in the Western world, it's about 1 in 4,000 people. That means 1 in 4,000 people. If you sample Bangalore, 1 in 4,000 people will have retinitis pigmentosa according to the Western calculations. Whereas there have been enough studies that have now shown us that the prevalence rates in India are higher than 1 in 1,000. That means if we are looking at a population of 1.3 billion in India, we're talking about at least 13 lakh people just with retinitis pigmentosa alone. Remember, we are only talking about retinitis pigmentosa here. There are several other conditions like Stargardt's macular degeneration, Leber's congenital amaurosis. These are some of the commonest ones. We unfortunately have no data on that at all. But suffice it to say that we have much larger numbers compared to the Western population. And so this is not a disease that we can call, is ignorable. In fact, according to the rare disease, definitions, typically talk about a disease that is rarer than 1 in, 200,000 and so on. Now, where does 1 in 1,000 come in when we're talking about 1 in 200,000, right? So in a way, these are not even rare diseases in India. They don't come, fit into the definition of rare diseases. So retinitis pigmentosa, some of, the people who have logged in have, retinitis pigmentosa. Typically starts in the first decade of life, first to second decade. A lot of them start with difficulty with night vision. It may not come into, especially in cities, it's not commonly probably noticeable because, a lot of kids are home by the time it's, it's dark. One of the common difficulties that children notice is, when they walk into a theater, where it's already dark, children struggle to find seats, find the seats. So the difficulty with night vision is one of the very, very common symptoms that, that is seen. And as the disease progresses, the side vision, for example, when you look at anything, when any person closes one eye and focuses on something, for example, in the room, wherever each of you are sitting, that even if you can see, along with the, whatever point of object that you are seeing, you can also see everything around you. That's called the field of vision. Now, this field of vision starts constricting as the disease progresses. So many people with advanced disease have very small, fields of vision, like tunnel vision. It's similar to what we would have, for example, if you saw something with binoculars. That's how, the tunnel vision. Fairly good central vision till very advanced states of the disease. So this is, just a depiction of how the fields can reduce. This can continue to reduce, all right? Now, what happens when we eye with classical retinitis pigmentosa looks like? You see all of these black spots, they're called bony spicules. In fact, they're all deposition of the same retinal pigment epithelial cells that we've been talking about. So this is how a classic, eye with retinitis pigmentosa looks like. Now, let's look at, a scan. I come back to this often because this is one way that it's possible to look at how the disease progresses in any patient. So for example, we were talking about these photoreceptors. Look at how the layer is complete in this eye, whereas look at this. This is an eye which has the photoreceptors that are remaining here. Remember that. So am I audible now? Someone said I wasn't audible.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You're audible.
Thank you. Yeah. So remember that. Look at this. That this is a eye with fairly advanced retinitis pigmentosa. So that's the amount of photoreceptors that are remaining. Even with this person blind. All right. Now the fields may have reduced. It is very likely that with this photoreceptor layer, this person's visual acuity can actually be 20/20 or 6/6. So this is a normal visual field when we test them, and this is a field that is fairly constricted. Just to show you how the fields reduce in people with retinitis pigmentosa. Okay. Now, one of the other common conditions is Stargardt's macular degeneration. I think this is one of the, next to retinitis pigmentosa, this is the common disease that we see in India. Now, what happens in Stargardt's is that there is I think I do have a picture. All right, okay. So this is, we're talking about the photoreceptors. These are the photoreceptors, and these are the retinal pigment epithelial cells. That's a schematic diagram. Actually, I think it's a very good diagram by the American Macular Society. All right, okay. Now, what happens is the photoreceptors constantly shed some parts of themselves. This is a normal phenomenon that happens in every single person anytime that visual function is happening. Okay, so now these get shed and then they get absorbed by the retinal pigment epithelium. This happens throughout a person's life. In Stargardt, this mechanism becomes defective. Because of mutations, the absorption of these chemicals that are being released, they're called lipofuscin, they start accumulating within the retinal pigment epithelial cells, and these cells become overloaded with lipofuscin. Because of this, now one of the most important functions of retinal pigment epithelial cells is to support these rods and cones. If these cells are not there, these cells don't survive. Vice versa. If these are not there, these don't survive. These are now getting degenerated because of being overloaded with lipofuscin. Over a period of time, they start becoming atrophic. Once they start degenerating, these cells also start degenerating. So this is a schematic diagram of someone with advanced macular degeneration, where these cells are all degenerate. Along with that, the rods and cones also degenerate. Okay. Now, what happens to a has this is, unlike retinitis pigmentosa, where the peripheral vision is lost, here the central vision is lost. All right. So this is, just in a way the reverse of what happens in RP. This is how the eye appears. When we look into the eye, RP, the macula itself was spared while the rest of it was affected. In Stargardt, it's the reverse. Here, the macula is affected while the remaining retina is relatively healthy. So this is how, it would appear inside the eye. And now again, let's look at the scan. All right. Again, the normal photoreceptor layer, and look at this eye. We do not have the photoreceptor layer nearly from here to here. So this now corresponds to the area where the person has lost his or her central vision. Right. Now, one of the things that I want to say before I move on to LCA is that it's a very, very common thing for people to be told the moment they have a diagnosis of either Stargardt's or retinitis pigmentosa that you're going to go blind. Please understand that most patients, in fact, with Stargardt's, in fact, maybe some patients with RP will never lose vision. So in let me rephrase myself. So in retinitis pigmentosa, your central vision will remain in almost all patients till you're in your late 40s, 50s. That means you're able to carry on with your work. You may need help with device and so on, but you do not go blind in most patients with retinitis pigmentosa. In Stargardt's, there are very few patients who will lose their peripheral vision at all. You will have difficulty with central vision, but you will have almost no difficulty with peripheral vision almost all your life. So Leber's congenital amaurosis, on the other hand, is a disease that starts almost in infancy or very early childhood. This, can present at birth with very severe vision loss. In fact, there are some children who may actually present with what we call nystagmus. That means, when the child looks at you, you see their eyes are constantly shaking. So this is called nystagmus. This happens because the eye is not able to, in a very gross way, the eye is not, and therefore the nystagmus develops. So these children also have very, very frequent eye rubbing and so on. Again, please remember that not every child with LCA goes blind. In fact, this is one condition where most of the gene therapy trials are happening. In fact, the only gene therapy that has been approved is also in LCA. Now, some of you have had a genetic testing. Many of you may not have had. One of the questions that's commonly asked is, why should I get a genetic testing done? When there's no treatment even. Secondly, unfortunately, in India, genetic testing is not covered by insurance. Most Western countries, the genetic testing is covered by insurance. So here it's unfortunately not. And therefore, one of the questions asked is, do we really need to spend money on a genetic testing at all? Okay. Now, what do we do in this? We were talking about the mutations. We basically identify the mutation that a person carries. There are different ways that we do this. Now, by getting a genetic testing done, a couple of things happen. One is we're able to make a more precise diagnosis. Sorry, someone is requesting to annotate. I don't think I can do it right now. So sorry for that. So maybe once the, apparently Prasanna mentioned that the presentation is going to be available online, it could get annotated later. I look into it. So why should we get a genetic testing done? It helps for a more precise diagnosis. So that means it's, when you have a precise diagnosis, you know what is the visual prognosis for each mutation. For example, even with the retinitis pigmentosa, within a given mutation, there are some of those that are severe, some of those are really not. So it gives us a more realistic expectation of what our vision is going to be. The most important in today's world is when we want to look for therapies. When you look online for therapies, if you, for example, type genetic gene therapy or stem cell therapy for retinitis pigmentosa, it's very unlikely you will get a straightforward answer because the therapies are very, very specific to each mutation, especially gene therapy, and therefore it helps us look for therapies around the world. One of the most important, reasons. Okay, so I'm now pregnant. Is my child going to develop the disease? So these are questions that commonly come up. And today it's possible with counseling to assess what the risk is. And let's say there is a risk. There is today possibilities of even assessing whether a woman is already pregnant, the baby has a risk of getting the disease. Within 8 to 12 weeks of pregnancy, we can do an amniotic fluid, chorionic villus sampling. So those are possibilities. Science has even gone to the extent of something called pre-implantation genetic diagnosis being possible. That means, let's say there is a big risk, and I have a disease, or I have a huge risk of my baby having the disease, and I really do not want to take a risk of getting pregnant and my finding out whether my child is going to get the disease. Because one of the ethical questions that comes up is, let's say I find out that I'm carrying a child that has a disease, that has a risk for the disease. What do I do? In diseases where there is a threat to life, the decision is easier to make. In a disease that only affects the eye, it becomes very difficult ethically. So today, it is possible to do in vitro fertilization by basically creating an embryo that is completely free of the disease. Of course, there are not many people who would probably be willing to risk this, but these are definite possibilities today. So these are some of the commonest mutations that some of you have had. ABCA4 in Stargardt also causes RP. USH2A causes something called Usher syndrome. One of the things that I would like to mention is many of these retinal dystrophies are restricted to the eye, not necessarily all of them. For example, some patients with Usher syndrome, along with difficulty in seeing, also have difficulty in hearing. Some of the very severe mutations in Usher syndrome are those which, who have progressive vision loss, but who also have such severe, hearing loss at birth that these children are deaf mute. So, I think it's a very difficult situation, to have one of those severe Usher syndrome. Thankfully, it's not very common in India, the severe form of Usher syndrome. So, most of the Usher syndrome that we see are where the hearing is near normal. So that's, a plus point. One of the, government policies in many countries, for example, I trained in UK. One of the government policies there is that these children, every child is, of course, screened for hearing at birth. Any child who is found, to be, who has hearing loss in both ears, they screen them for Usher syndrome. If the child has a mutation for Usher syndrome, that child actually gets a cochlear implant in both the ears by the time the child is, 6 months to a year old. That means this child will now go on to develop normal speech and hearing, at least doubt. Unfortunately, I think we are a long way off Usher syndrome. Leber's congenital amaurosis is one of the common ones. We have many children with LCA, RDH12. I've just mentioned that. We have RP6, many mutations with that. One of the other common mutations we find is a disease called choroideremia. It appears very similar to retinitis pigmentosa, but is mostly, is seen only in men. We also have, children with the PROM1 mutation, which causes retinitis pigmentosa very early on in life. We have said, LCA caused by other mutations. We have, I think, a couple of children with a mutation in something called MERTK1 and NR2E3. So these are some of the common mutations. I'm saying this because I know some of you who are out there have these mutations. You always have a question of what are we going to do about it? That's why I brought these up. So most of you would have had a complete assessment, the usual clinical examination. I'm going to skip some of these. I think we've because there are two common that can happen. That's treatable. The second is we've looked at the scan of the macula. So there is something called macular edema. Once every 6 months nearly. Okay. Let's look at what is the treatment. I have just focused on, some things here. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of questions that are going to come about. I've had many people ask me about retinal implants. These are, implants that are placed right under the retina, over the retina. They're called epiretinal implants. This is an implant that's placed on the retinal surface at the macula. This is called Argus 2. This is by a company called Second Sight that is in the US that's developing this. It is a very complex process to put this inside the eye. And we don't have anyone who has had it in India. It's not a very one surgically easy procedure to do, I think, but more importantly, the visual recovery following this is not as good as expect with this. And so the people with this actually require a lot of training to be able to use these devices. So unfortunately, we don't have anyone in India with this. The white elephant in the room, gene therapy, because I think that's what a lot of people have heard about. Before we talk about gene therapy, I want you guys to know, how does a clinical trial progress? Because when we look at anything online and find that, for example, there is some clinical trial that's happening, for example, let's say for PROM1 mutation, we although our hopes go up very high, saying okay, so there is some treatment that's has started. There's no doubt about it. But I want you to look at this because there is a really long roadmap for regulatory pathway. So the first starts with preclinical. When we say preclinical, that means there is a proof of concept that something may actually work that has already been done. We've also finished the animal experiment. So that itself takes a while. We then have phase 1 studies. So phase 1 studies are done only to assess safety. we do not look at whether what we are doing is efficacious, is effective at all. We are only looking at safety. Once this happens, we go on to phase 2. We will still look at safety, but we're now going to start looking at some efficacy of the condition. The next comes, once we have had enough data from phase 2. Remember, we are now talking from preclinical to phase 1 to phase 2. We are talking about a minimal of 6 to 8 years from this point to this. And then we have phase 3 is when once we have enough data, we can go to the regulatory board. It could be DCGI in India. It could be the US FDA. And once we have that, phase 4 continues to get more data. Now, only once we have enough clinical data can the drug get approved for testing in humans. In many treatments, this preclinical phase could take a decade or more. And then once we have phase 3, only then the drug get approved for being used in humans. I'm sorry, it's not testing. This is for being used in human beings. Okay, and only subsequently do you get approved. All right. So what does gene therapy do? Now we've been talking about the defects in gene. Basically, now we know that there is a defective gene. What we do is we would introduce a healthy a gene copy into a viral vector. Now viruses are known to replicate very rapidly. So these are called AAV vectors or adeno-associated vectors. These vectors, they themselves do not cause any harm. So the healthy gene is inserted to the virus vector, and this is now made into a bundle and is injected under the retina. Remember, when I say injected under the retina, it's again a major surgery. We're not going to go into those details, but it is not something that we would take very lightly, because the moment we talk about a subretinal injection or injection under the retina, we are now also talking about the complications of subretinal surgery. Okay. Now, one of the biggest things that happened, for people with rare disease anywhere, not just the eye, was the approval of the gene therapy, 2 years ago for a very specific disease. It's called the drug is called Luxturna. This is for use specifically for patients with a very specific mutation. We've been talking about multiple of these mutations. One of the mutations is called RPE65 mutation. Okay. Now, RPE65 mutation, most people causes Leber's congenital amaurosis. It can also cause retinitis pigmentosa. That means it will not cause Stargardt or any other disease. It will cause either RP or very commonly LCA. Now, this is again not a very common mutation amongst all of those that cause LCA. There are very specific reasons why it was picked up. So this can now be given to a patient who has 2 copies of the RPE65 mutation. Okay, so one of the things that I want to point out is following the subretinal injection or the gene therapy, surgery. What we need to know is that there is no dramatic increase in the vision. It is not like today I have a patient with RPE65, mutation LCA, for example, that let's say the child's vision is about, the child is able to see about 2 or 3 meters, or let's say, the first letter on the chart that we normally, use to examine patients. Now, what happens with following injection is a very small increase in the visual acuity. Patients that the company, it's called the Spark Therapeutics, actually went to US FDA saying this is our data. The FDA said, your results following the injection are so minimal that how do we even know it's working? So Spark went back and developed this test. Now this is actually a room that is has multiple humps and so on, blocks. Now what these people are able to do is there are varying grades of darkness, and the child or the patient is asked to walk along these blockages, and following the injection, they are able to do the same thing much better. Okay, incremental change that's happened. The reason I say this is a lot of people think that if I have the injection, my vision is going to be completely normal. It is not so. There is a definitive positive result. it is not something that is going to be dramatic. The reason I say this is a very, very expensive injection. Not yet approved in India. The company that has, has the marketing rights for India is called Novartis. Now, Novartis was supposed to approve this sometime in February. I think it's from the pandemic, and so it hasn't happened. The vial in the US, it's a 0.03 ml vial, costs nearly $500,000. It's $450,000 for the 0.3 ml, excluding the cost of the injection. So I don't know what price point Novartis is going to bring it in India. And that is why I was trying to say that, let's say they bring it at 2 crores, just my number, don't quote me on that. Let's say they bring it at 2 crores. Now, there could be someone saying that, what, I will gather 2 crores. Am I going to be able to say everything normally from tomorrow? No. This is the reason I was saying that we need to set our expectations very, very practically when we talk about gene therapy. Okay. So we don't know whether, what the changes that's going to be. There are risks associated with the surgery. We don't know whether repeat injections are required. We have no idea. But the point is there is treatment. And that's something that we should not, forget. There is treatment today. So once this is there, there is going to be a series of gene therapy trials that are going to come out. Okay. One of the other trials that have been, that have had very good results is in a condition called choroideremia. Now, they've had phase 1 and 2 results, has shown encouraging results. This is just about the only other mutation that where phase 3 trial has started. There is no other trial that has phase 3. So this is to set your expectations right, that as long as there are phase 1 and 2, it's very likely that many will go into phase 3, but it will take time. So these are all some of those that actually have are in phase 1 and phase 2 trials. The RPGR mutation, X-linked RP, some of those ushers, many in LCA. With Stargardt itself, I want to say that there are many trials that are happening, but there are currently no gene therapy trials with Stargardt, unfortunately. The reason is Stargardt gene itself is a very large gene, and there are technical difficulties of putting this onto the AAV vector. So the other vectors are more difficult. So as we speak, there are no clinical trials for gene therapy in Stargardt, although there are several other, all of them in phase 2. That means there is a very large hope that this will go on to phase 3 and we'll have treatment. Stem cell therapy. Many people ask me, can we get stem cell therapy done? I do believe there are several clinics in India that are running so-called, stem cell therapy clinics. Now, what we need to remember is cell therapy. I'll just tell you the advantages and disadvantages. One of the biggest advantages is that we do not need to know what the mutation is. It is not mutation specific, and that's a fantastic thing. Because is so long. So cell therapy is actually a very, a good thing, because it doesn't matter what the mutation is. The only and the bigger problem is that remember now, we are talking about the rods and cones and the retinal pigment epithelium. Most of the companies that are working on stem cell therapy currently have the ability to create these retinal pigment epithelium cells in the lab, and then they're now in what we call phase 2 trials to inject them under the retina. Whereas for rods and cones themselves, most of us are in the very, very beginning. And so remember, when we eventually have to treat stem cell, these diseases with stem cells, we need a combination of 2. There are some, of course, especially with Stargardt's, because the basic problem is with the retinal pigment epithelium. Probably stem cell therapy is a tad easier in Stargardt's compared to other forms of retinal dystrophy. Okay, so I'm part of a company called iStem. We actually run the lab in Bangalore. This is they look like 2 pencils with the sharpened tips. These are actually the retinal pigment epithelial cells made out of human tissue, and we currently are looking at putting them into. Okay, I do have. Okay, so we finished animal experiments. We are looking at early phase 1 trials probably early next year. Remember, this is not going to be for retinal dystrophy, because when we're looking at retinal pigment epithelium, we would rather start with some other disease like macular degeneration because of aging. Whereas I'm pretty sure this is going to happen, but it'll take time for sure. Okay, so this is the photoreceptors that are already in the lab. Like I said, it's going to take time. Okay. The last thing I'm going to touch upon is visual aids. Okay. Please remember, anytime the therapy is going to be available, it is certainly going to happen to you, near and dear ones. But what we should not forget in the meanwhile is that using the appropriate visual aids actually makes our life much, much, much simpler. Okay. So how do we define low vision? So there are certain definitions. What we need to remember is that for every person who's blind in the world, there are 3 people with low vision. That means there is a much larger population of people with low vision, in fact, compared to blind people. Okay, there are several things that we can do depending on what the need of the individual is. I'm not going to go into these details. Several that are available online. Most centers, that look at patients with genetic diseases have their own low vision rehab center. One of the, I think, most important low vision device that I would recommend wholeheartedly is the mobile. The mobile that we all carry, the cell phones, has so many apps that can be used to make your life, easy on a day-to-day basis. So please, one of the easiest things to do is to use the accessibility options on the cell phones. Okay. We ourselves at, CEGR have developed, a device that we call Lumino. This is a device that can be used mostly for children to take to classrooms and be able to use them in classroom to continue with their classes. This actually has been, it's actually been a very good. People ask me about this available in India. ORCAM is a wearable disease that can be spectacle. This is a tether. It does not leave, but it will read face recognition and so on. This is, I'm sure it's available for anyone outside. I'm sure they should be able to, send it here too. Okay. eSight is something that's actually available for people, if someone wants it here. This uses, AR, augmented reality and, virtual reality. This is mostly useful for people with central vision loss, like macular degeneration or Stargardt's. It's not very useful for people with advanced retinitis pigmentosa because it does not help with the visual field. Whereas for people with central vision loss, this is quite useful. And I think this is available. People have asked me about the price point. There is a single dealer in India. I think, it's probably about 9 or 10 lakhs. It's an expensive device to use. Okay. So that's where I'm a lot more, retinal dystrophies are not very rare in India. Treatment possibilities are really real. And please, let's make use of low vision devices till the point that are going to be available. And I'm not things that I kept when I spoke, so I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, hi. This is Sridhar here, ma'am, from Chennai. I think you.
Hi, Sridhar.
I hope you do remember me. And February month we have met in the.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So, I told you I took the genetic testing in Central area. I got the report. I got the report stating that there is no result in this particular test, so we need to go for other advanced tests. And for this test itself, nothing is there. So again, they are asking me to go for some advance. So as the pandemic started, the corona pandemic started, I did visit the hospital, and I sent an email to the concerned admin people on this. But they never told about this. The result can be varied. They never told me this one. What is your suggestion? What is your suggestion, ma'am?
Okay, so that's a very common question that people have, Sridhar. So when we talk about this genetic testing, when we, for example, do one of the common things that we do is something called a whole exome sequencing. Okay, very likely they did something like that in you. What we need to remember is that there's only a 60% chance of a mutation being picked up in anyone. It's not just in you. Okay, I have a few patients who now logged in whom we have not been able to pick up a mutation. So 60% is the pickup rate typically. So what we can do in some situations is actually, so when we talk about an exome sequencing, we only looking at those mutations that appear on something called the exome. An exome is an area which involves all what we call exons. Those are the disease causing, areas. Okay. Now the pickup rate is only 60%. The next step is what we actually call a whole genome sequencing. Although when you said 14,000, what they've probably done is a panel. All right. When we do a panel, what we would have done is to pick up a few common mutations, let's say about 200 mutations that are common, and see if you match with any of those. When that's negative, they will probably now do an exome sequencing. There's a good possibility they'll find a mutation in you, Sridhar. But I have patients where an exome sequencing hasn't found, and therefore we've got to the next level of actually doing something called a whole genome sequencing. We sequence a whole genome. And even there are times when we've not found a mutation. Okay, so this is not really a limitation of the lab test. This is a limitation of science itself anywhere in the world today. Okay, so I would say don't give up hope, Sridhar.
Yeah, I'm not giving up the hope, man.
Please go ahead with the next step. You should. You should certainly go ahead with the next step, Parsha. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay,
thank you, Dr.
For this pandemic to somewhat getting. One more final question for my ma'am. You know very well that people nowadays we are going online classes and the kids are using computers,
correct,
laptops, and everything. So, what do you recommend? It's they are using around 3 hours, something like that.
It's
so
okay. Don't worry about that. No, it's absolutely okay. It's just that, so my own daughter was telling me, so she's in 11th grade. She was calculating and telling me she spends 8 hours. So don't worry about that, okay? Let's get on to the other question. So here's the thing, okay? Sridhar, 1 second. I'm going to stop you there. Anything that's outside the purview of retinal dystrophies, let's, you all have my number. Please feel free to call me because, I don't want to stop others from asking me questions.
Yeah, ma'am, we have a lot of questions. Thank you, ma'am, for that wonderful presentation. It was extremely lucid. I believe we'll get right into the questions. So we have calls from in our ORDI helpline. We have a national helpline where we get calls from a lot of patients with retinal disorders. So the common question is, can we get a genetic test done free for cost? Is there any genetic test that can happen for RP? Conditions like RP, most of the patients.
I know.
So they ask, is there anything free that, that we can avail?
Unfortunately, not as of now. But there is an effort to sort of, do a collection and see if we can do it. I think something is going to happen soon. So, I know that, this can become a significant amount of money for, some people, and that's understandable.
Right.
So I will keep you posted about this. Okay. So there is some effort to make this as a free thing or at a much reduced cost. I will certainly keep you posted.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. I think that will be a ray of hope for many patients.
Absolutely.
And, we have many common questions. Some interesting questions I have picked up upon. There's a question called, how far do you think newborn eye screening will help in, preventing the...
No. Newborn eye screening cannot prevent.
Okay.
Remember, a newborn is already born.
Right.
A newborn eye screening is only meant to pick up diseases early.
Right.
Okay, a newborn eye screening there are several things that can happen. Okay, but
maybe early interventions can help them. Right.
So one of the see, most children with LCA who do present with low vision, the parents figure out newborn screening is not meant to pick up these because this. Otherwise, where the diagnosis can get missed. Although they could get a wrong diagnosis, that is for sure, because I've had many patients who get a wrong diagnosis, but generally it's the group of retinal dystrophies at least. So that much, is okay.
Right. And ma'am, most of the patients, again, in the helpline, I'll just finish this. So since we are into this awareness and advocacy and patient support, so most of these patients come up with asking that, is there any chance that will I get my eyesight back? Is there a possibility that I can restore my vision to some extent? How do you think ORDI as an organization can work with such patients in India?
Okay, there are two things that you're talking about. Okay, so let's first talk about whether the problem can be reversed. All right. In fact, I think someone else just asked the same question: whether we can stop the degradation that is already, can we reverse? Be
Ma'am, your voice is breaking. Yeah.
Passive functional. Better? Is that better? No?
Yeah. It is better. It is better.
The disease cannot be reversed by any form of therapy as we speak. Okay?
Right.
Whatever therapy, be it pharmacological, gene therapy, stem cell therapy, can only halt further progression from happening. It cannot reverse as of today. But, considering the research that's happened in the last 10 years, I'm pretty sure that day will also be, possible.
Agree, ma'am. So, is it worth spending for genetic test when in cases where there are no treatment options? Is it worth spending money for the genetic test for a patient?
Precisely what I said, right? First of all, to even know whether, how much. See, I think for someone who's diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa, let's say in their 20s,
right,
knowing through a mutation whether I will have a reasonable vision till my 40s or 50s, or will I have reasonable in the next 10 years is a big thing, right?
Right.
Just last week I was seeing a very elderly a set of sisters, two sisters. One is 75, the other is 78, and they have come for an eye examination. And I tend to because these are patients who come looking for me, so I was asking them, okay, neither of them were married. I said, what's the reason? You know what they said? 40 years ago, they were told that one of the sisters was going to go blind with retinitis pigmentosa. And so the other sister said, let me also not marry, because obviously she was not going to get married. Nobody was going to marry her because she was going to go blind. The other sister said, let me take care of her. And neither of them married. I'm not saying getting married is a be-all and all, but I'm just saying that how things can change, okay? Now, the sister with RP is still today able to see. She walked into my room for example. Right? So, a genetic mutation tells us how severe the mutation is.
Yeah, ma'am. So we have another very interesting questions. There is a patient who asked that in twins, since you mentioned sisters, in twins, is it possible that one child has RP genes while the other child has inherited normal genes? Is there a possibility?
It depends on whether they are, identical or unidentical twins. Okay? So in fraternal twins or unidentical twins, obviously it is like two siblings, right? It doesn't matter.
Right.
Whereas with identical twins, there's a very, very high chance that, both will have it.
Right. And there is another question from Hema. And she's asking that how do you think India is placed in comparison to countries abroad in terms of research and clinical trials, especially for Stargardt disease?
Okay. We are certainly, behind. There is no doubt about it. But if I look at gene therapy, like I said, I do think there is some center that is looking at gene therapy, but a lot of other therapies are not happening. Now, when I said iStem, we ourselves are looking at, cell therapy. And one of the first things following AMD, we're going to look at is Stargardt. But if you look at the rest of the world, we're certainly about, a decade behind. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
That gap is, definitely sort of closing in faster, but I don't think we can say that we are on par with, the rest of the world as of today.
Right. And there are so many questions that I'm overwhelmed. Yeah. So,
just a second, Swapna. So I had, in the last slide of mine, I don't know if I even showed my last slide. There is, both my email ID and my number. So please feel free to sort of, share that with people so that,
Yeah, I hope participants got that message. I mean, we have another interesting questions. There is Deepak who's asking whether brain implants, for example, Neuralink, can help in restoring vision in RP patients in the future. Is there a possibility?
Yeah. Hi, Deepak. I don't know about Neuralink, but there is the same company called Second Sight that implants is now actually looking at something called Orion. Okay, like the Orion Mall in Bangalore. It's called Orion. Now, Orion is an implant that is going to be a cortical implant. So what they're saying is they're going to implant it directly into the occipital cortex. So the occipital cortex is at the back of the, the back portion of the brain. That is the area that helps with vision. So they are looking at an implant into the occipital cortex, and therefore it should bypass all forms of, diseases. It doesn't matter whether the person has glaucoma, retinitis pigmentosa, optic atrophy. It's supposed to bypass all of them and, into the visual cortex. I do think it will become reality, but, honestly, Second Sight has been on at Argus implant, the rectal implant, for 20 years. Okay, so I remember going to their lab in the US. This is way back in 2008. And they had these set of experiments that were going on for about 14 to 16 years already. So look at the roadmap it has taken them to reach for Argus. And, of course, it's Orion shouldn't take such a long time, but I'm pretty confident it's going to happen in my lifetime. So it's going to happen in a lot of your lifetimes.
Yeah. Ma'am, another question. I think maybe we should take this last question, and the remaining questions I would mail to you. Participants, please stay assured. We will mail all your unanswered questions to Dr. Rajni Bhattu, and she'll answer it back, and we shall update you. Ma'am, I'll take this last question. Is there a particular kind of genetic test suggested for Stargardt's? I think it's a concerned parent. So, is there a specific test for Stargardt? Is what he's asking.
Say, like to say this is the test you get done. Test is the information is okay. So I have this, today there's something called the DTC, the direct to consumer testing, where you can actually put a drop of your blood on a blotting paper and send it across, and they will give you, sheets of genetic, results. Okay. I have patients emailing me those, which I refuse to look at, because if you do not have the clinical information, please do not even look at the genetic information. Okay. But if someone has told you or your child that, you have Stargardt, then definitely, there are certain specific genes that you can look at. You can actually get a panel for Stargardt done, because that definitely reduces the cost. But please bear in mind that if that becomes negative, then you're going to go in and do the next test. So you got to be prepared to get the next set of tests done if this comes negative.
Which test did you say? You just mentioned the test. Which one is it? Could you repeat that?
Say it again. No, said, if it's Stargardt, yeah, you can actually get something called a panel testing done. Most labs have panels for retinal dystrophies. Okay. If someone has told you it's Stargardt, you can certainly get the panel testing done, but make sure that the clinical information is appropriate. That's all.
All right.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible. Swapna,
Yeah.
if there are a few questions, I'm okay to hang in for another few minutes. I don't mind.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, then sure.
I really don't mind, because I know it's been a while since I've seen a few of my own patients. So I'm open to, hang around, take the questions.
That is lovely. Then we also have.
We have no problem.
Yeah.
I have absolutely no problem.
Yeah,
Please, yeah.
We do not have an issue. So, ma'am, there's a patient who's asking. A participant who asked that what is liquid retina prosthesis? We'll wait for doctor to join back. I think she's facing connectivity issue.
Hello?
Yeah, I'll try connecting to Dr. Rajni.
Ma'am, actually, I have a question for Rajni Bhattu, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm trying to get back to her, Sachin.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'll call her once and check. Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, ma'am, we lost you. So maybe, would you try to, yeah, re-log in, just, yeah, definitely. We are okay with that, yeah. Dr. Rajni is trying to re-log in. Participants, please have patience.
Okay.
If anybody have information like we have any related hospitals in Hyderabad for madam?
Hospitals in Hyderabad related to retinal disorders?
Yeah, where madam can come and talk to us, like madam can visit here.
Yeah, ma'am is based out of Bangalore, but we can ask this. I mean, is there a possibility of online consultation? We can check with her.
Okay. Yeah. Fine.
Is it possible to see her in Bangalore?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can hear me, right?
Yes,
okay,
ma'am,
for some
you're
reason,
audible.
I don't think you can see my video, so that's all right.
Yeah, that's all right. Ma'am, there's a question from a patient. I mean, they are based out of Hyderabad, and they want to know whether they could consult you remotely. Is there a possibility?
I don't know how to do this remotely, but I think, if they're happy to send their images and so on, it's possible. Alternately, I can actually put them on to one of my, good friends and colleagues there, through whom we could probably connect. He can get the right test done.
Okay.
Then they can connect to me. That may actually be a better option.
Ma'am, maybe you can mention the name of your colleague. Is it okay with you?
Yeah, 100%. There is one Dr. Satish Guti. It's called, I think, Anand Eye Institute. I wouldn't know the address offhand, but his name is Satish Guti Agraharam. He runs this place called Anand Eye Institute, and he should be able to help you. Do connect with me, and I'm happy to connect you to him and help you out.
Ma'am, I'm a parent. I'm calling from Gurgaon, and how can we come and meet you in Bangalore?
You can come and meet me once this pandemic is over, for sure.
Yeah, okay.
So
okay.
I do run, like I said, I do run the specific center. I do have a couple of them who come from Delhi and so on, but don't do it now. Just wait till, this pandemic is over. I don't want you guys to come from Delhi and have to be quarantined in Bangalore for a week. Bangalore is terrible currently. So, but yes, please, anytime, yes.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Ma'am,
there is a question.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Ma'am, I'm
Sachin,
I'm Sachin from Kanpur. I come from you at February this year.
Yes.
You can remember me?
Yes, Sachin. Yes. How are you, Sachin?
I'm fine. Ma'am, actually, I have a question for what if someone not... Ma'am, actually, I can speak Hindi too. It is possible?
Speak in Hindi. Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Okay. कोई अगर बचपन मतलब उसके पेरेंट्स में कोई वो ना हो, मिस्टेक ना हो, किसी तरह का जेनेटिक डिसऑर्डर ना हो, तो क्या और बच्चे को अगर कोई बीमारी हो जाए, जैसे कि मुझे ऑप्टिकल डिसऑर्डर है, वो ऑप्टिक नर्व में डिसऑर्डर है, हाँ, यस, ऑप्टिकल एट्रोफी. So is there possibility to transfer this disease to my children?
I don't think we've done a genetic testing on you, Sachin. So we can see if it's not necessary that you have to transmit it, okay? It only depends on the kind of mutation you have, okay? This is where genetic testing becomes very important, because if we know that you carry it on both the copies, and then you, have it, you marry someone who doesn't have a copy, then your child obviously will not get it, okay? But we have to test you, and then test your wife for the same. These are all very easily doable, Sachin. So, it is not, there were times when these were very difficult. These are very easily doable today. So, isko tu aasani se kar sakte hai.
Okay, ma'am. And other suggestion from my side. Actually, I have discovered another visual aid which is called Envision glasses. This is similar like eVision. This is similar like eVision, and it is a much affordable price, but very expensive now. फिर भी बहुत महंगा है. So it is a
Sachin, maybe for the you said Envision glasses, right?
Envision,
good.
Yes.
So here's the thing: you guys will know a lot more about this, Sachin, than I would. So yes, I'm happy to learn from you. हाँ, कितना हुआ Sachin?
It's $1,500.
ठीक है.
Price.
Okay.
It's much less than 9 lakh
of eSight
rupees.
So
yes.
Envision is ENVISION. Is that how you spell it? कैसे spell
yes,
करते हो?
yes.
That's for everyone else. Envision. आप और कैसे इसको खरीदा Sachin?
Envision, ma'am, I don't buy this for my site because I use my phone.
Acha, good. You are using.
And Envision has a Android app also, so we can use this too.
Okay, so that's information for anyone who wants it. Okay.
Thank you for.
You're welcome, Sachin.
Thank you, Sachin. Ma'am, there is a question by Pooja Agarwal.
Yeah.
She wants you to highlight on gene 2 mutation or 2 gene mutation rather.
What is 2?
I didn't understand.
Like
you want
it's a
to
mutation of 2 genes.
Yeah, Pooja, she is here. Yeah.
Go ahead, Pooja. Yeah.
Yeah, ma'am, like there's a mutation of 2 genes. It's PROM1 and RBP3. So, ma'am, like I wanted to know that how far the progression can be in such cases.
So, is this? Are you saying that there is one copy of PROM1 and one copy of RBP3?
Yes, ma'am.
And has that been proven that that's the one? The reason is PROM1 typically, causes a disease only when it's in combination with the PROM1. It's a recessive mutation.
Yes, ma'am. It's like inherited disease RP41, and its next one is RP66.
So I don't know what testing you got done, Pooja, because unless you have 2 copies of, there are some of these mutations that work together. Okay.
Yes,
but I don't know if these 2 work together, very honestly. So maybe where do you live, Pooja?
Ma'am, I'm from Bhubaneswar, Odisha. Ma'am, my son is 15 years old. He is having Harpy.
So maybe we should, you should write to me. We'll figure out if someone can see you clinically to see what you have, and then we'll discuss this. Because I personally don't think this is a combination that's causing, the disease.
Ma'am, can I mail you
that's right.
reports? Can I mail you all the reports and I have the reports?
You can, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Ma'am, there is another question. They want us to highlight on RDH12 gene mutation. They want to know more about RDH12 gene mutation.
Sure. Yeah. Who has RDH12 mutation here? Who's the person with the question?
Sachin Kumar.
Okay. I don't know if I'm seeing him. Sachin, hi. RDH12 is actually not a very common mutation in India, but who has this, Sachin, if you don't mind me asking? How old is a person? Basically, that's what I want to know.
Sachin, do we have you online?
I'm Sachin Verma and he's Sachin Kumar.
Hi.
So Sachin Kumar, right? Yeah. So Sachin Kumar he's unmuted himself.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sachin. Sachin Kumar, please go ahead.
No, I unmuted him.
Okay, you unmuted him. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Sachin, are you there? Sachin Kumar?
Hello.
Yeah, he's here.
Yeah, go ahead, Sachin. Sachin Kumar, please go ahead.
कुमार का पूछना है. Hello.
Yes, please.
Hello.
Go. Good evening. Go ahead.
Hello.
बताइए सर, हम आपको सुन सकते हैं. Okay.
Yeah, meanwhile, I think we'll take other questions.
Yes, please. Go ahead, yeah.
Hello.
Sachin, हम आपको सुन सकते हैं, Sachin.
We are able to hear you. Can you hear me? Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, yes,
okay,
yes.
Ma'am, I thank you so much, ma'am. I wanted to know regarding RDH12.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to know what is the age of the person who has RDH12 mutation.
Ma'am, my daughter was diagnosed with RP, and we've got a gene testing done. And in the gene testing, ma'am, there was a mutation. So my husband, yes, ma'am, my husband and me, we both had a copy of the same gene, which is why our daughter, yes, has got RP.
How old is your daughter? How old is your daughter?
Right now, doctor, she is almost 11 years old.
Okay. And how good is her vision currently, ma'am?
Well, she has a of 20 by technically, ma'am, she is visually impaired. Her peripheral vision is quite less, and that is what it is. I think it's probably 20.
That's all right, ma'am. That's okay.
500 or something.
Okay.
20 by 80, ma'am. 20 by 80 and 20 by 100.
Very, very good vision. Okay, 20 by 80 is something that is actually fantastic for someone with RDH12. Because the reason I ask is a lot of them, RDH12 in some people can be a very severe mutation. So if she doesn't have that, it's good. It can be, not in all. Okay, so if your child at 11 has 20 by 80, it's fairly, she may not have a very severe mutation. Okay, coming to your question about gene therapy or stem cell therapy. So there is a very big effort to start gene therapy for RDH12 in UK. Right? So they're currently starting about 4 mutations, phase 2 trials, and one of them is RDH12. So I do think that RDH12 mutation will have therapy fairly soon.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think I gave you the wrong figure, ma'am. I've just opened her file. Her right eye is 20 by 125 and her left eye is 20 by 253, ma'am.
Okay. So she's still able to manage to go to school, right? What I want you to do is, can you just write to me, please? Just email me with the details and we'll talk, okay?
Ma'am, that would be... Ma'am, can I have your email address, ma'am?
Yes. We will leave it here at the end of this session.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, let me just anyway, say this once again to everyone. It's Rajni. It's my name, Rajni.Bhattu, RAJANI .BATTU. Please note there's no H anywhere. B for Bangalore.
Okay, BATTU. Right, Dr. Rajni.
At CEGR. It stands for Center for Eye Genetics and Research, CEGR.org.
Okay. Doctor, I'll just repeat, Rajni.Bhattu, BATTU at the rate of CEGR.org.
Perfect, yeah. Okay.
Great.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah.
So, doctor, I'll write to you. Please, and then maybe you can let me know.
Certainly.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, doctor.
Not at all.
Thank you so much. Right. Thank you.
Yes, Swapna, next one.
We have one very interesting question from Ms. Vaishali Pai. She is one of the PAGs. And she's
one of the
PAGs, ma'am, patient support groups.
Okay.
Vaishali Pai, she is the founder of one of the PSGs. So nice. She first of all says that it's a lovely presentation. And then Ms. Vaishali has a question. Can we get a list of pediatric low vision assistive devices and the possible visual impairments they can be used for? I think that is basically for the students that the children that she helps.
Vaishali, I think that will depend so much on where each of this child is and what his or her need is. But I am happy to provide you a list that can help.
Yeah. Do we have any more questions? Any missed questions? So yeah, we have a lot of questions on stem cell therapy.
Okay. Someone has also asked, can we try naturopathy along with allopathy?
Yeah.
Right.
And there is another question by they're asking why do you think that the prevalence of RP is so high in India?
So there's the prevalence of marriages among families still, like uncle niece marriages, and these are very first cousins. For example, for some reason we believe that the first cousins on mom's side are okay to get married to. The dad side are the ones that are sister brothers. So that's one of the reasons. Apart from that too, most of us marry within the same community. Even if we don't marry within the same let's say family, we all marry in the same community. So that's actually a risk, because when we're with the community, we are all carrying the same recessive mutations. And therefore, a child having a recessive mutation and dystrophy is, not abnormal.
Right.
Okay. So hang on, I'm actually going to, address a couple of questions here. One of them was a naturopathy along with allopathy. So here's the thing: if allopathy at this point is saying, do not, I mean, we have no right. I don't think I have any right to say don't use naturopathy, right? So in fact, one of the centers in Kerala, this is called Sridhariam. Sridhariam is a place that is dedicated to patients with retinal dystrophies mostly. Okay, but it's eye diseases. So I have many of my patients who also do Ayurveda and so on. So please feel free. The same thing goes for acupuncture. I have no idea. In fact, there is actually a clinical trial that's going on, trying to figure out acupuncture. So that's also okay. I don't know anything about homeopathy at all. The other thing is, I think Anjana actually said endogamy. Absolutely right. That's the reason. One of the questions Anjana asked me was, I think a question that someone else also raised, I think Sridhar or someone, saying that screen time for, children with retinal dystrophies. Right. Now that's actually, one, I think Sridhar asked about screen time for any child, but here we are talking about screen time for children with retinal dystrophies. Typically, we do talk about, the excessive light exposure that can happen, right? Now, when we talk about high light exposure, we are mostly talking about, fundus cameras that take pictures of the eye and so on. I don't have any experience, I don't have scientific data, but I would think that the light that's coming from a laptop or, an iPad probably is not too bad to be, exposed to for a long time. There are going to be issues in terms of the, eyes getting tired, eyes getting dry and so on. But I don't know of, any effect on the retinal dystrophy itself. But of course, these are very, very, very unusual times. I don't think any child has been on a system for as long as, he or she has been during these pandemic times, unfortunately. So I don't know if you're going to see anything in the long run. But from what I generally know, I don't think it should be too much of an issue.
Sorry, hi ma'am, this is Sridhar. You told me there's some Kerala homeopathy center.
It's not homeopathy, it is Ayurveda. It's called
Ayurveda. Can you just, yes, Sridhari ma'am, can you just, Sridhari.
It's SSR, I'll type it out here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Anjana has written it. She's actually mentioned it.
Anjana has written it, yeah.
Dr. Rajni Bhattu.
Yeah.
Madam, yeah, thank you very much for the session. Allow me to leave. I have another webinar continuing now. So I
Not at all, Prasanna. Anytime. Thank you so much. You're wonderful. Thank you. What proportion of patients with retinal disease? Oh, that's a question that Deepak, hello, good evening. What proportion of patients with retinal degeneration suffer from depression? Is that what you're saying? Have depression?
risk of depression do they have? So in your practice, do you see patients coming with emotionally disturbed or having depression because of the progressive vision loss?
Absolutely, Deepak.
And like, how do you address that?
See, ideally, you should be sitting with, here in my center, Deepak, I am one in all. I used to have a genetic counselor, but now I build a rapport with my patients, so I do everything on my own.
Okay.
Ideally, I think these patients do require a counselor. We're not talking about just a genetic counselor. I would also think about a psychological counselor for sure, because I think vision loss is something that is so difficult to accept.
Correct.
As much as the vision loss, the fear of vision loss. So ideally, I think many of them need to be seen by a psychological counselor too. That would be a good thing, but I'm not sure how how feasible it is. So incidentally, let me just introduce Deepak Bagga. Dr. Deepak Bagga is a very senior consultant in the Deepak. Maybe you should put yourself on mute because I think I'm echoing on your side.
Okay.
Yeah. So Deepak Bagga is a very senior consultant in the Department of Low Visual Rehabilitation from LV Prasad Institute in Hyderabad. In fact, I think that's the best visual rehab center in India that we have. I actually still send a lot of my children with severe vision loss, babies with severe vision loss to him still. He has set up one of the best visual rehab centers in India. So if any of you, if you have a possibility to visit their center in Hyderabad, I would say that's the first place to go to. Like I think Vaishali was asking me what are the list of device and so on. Vaishali, one visit to LVP and Deepak Bagga would probably do justice to you.
We shall inform her, ma'am. And Dr. Deepak Bagga, we are very pleased to have you today on the session.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. It was really wonderful talk. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And a lot of my students and colleagues are there who are attending as well. And I think, yeah, so they also have been benefited with your talk.
Thank you, Deepak. Deepak, I'm still hoping at some point we will be able to set up a center of visual rehab, the kind of excellent one that you have in Hyderabad, somewhere in Bangalore. Honestly, I think that's a huge lack that we have. Because there is so much that can be done with the appropriate, visual devices. I think we're not doing justice enough there.
Sure, we will work together on that.
Thank you. Yeah. So Deepak has given his, details there. Oh, Anjana gave it. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I think Raghavendra asked me about Remefusin, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So this is, I think, a recent trial that has been started. This is a drug that I think it's a complement inhibitor. There is some theory in Stargardt degeneration that there is an element of inflammation there. So what this drug does is to help prevent the buildup of lipofuscin that happens in the retinal pigment epithelial cells. This is again, Ravindra, a very early phase 2 trial. So I think, it's going to be a while before we have an answer. The good thing is that it looks like it's an oral drug. I could be wrong, but I think it's an oral drug. So I think, that's a good thing. So, let's wait for that. There's another question that I actually noticed and I forgot. Someone asked me about liquid retinal processes. Yes. Yeah. So, we were talking about the retinal processes, retinal implants. Now, liquid retinal processes is nothing but, trying to use nanomaterials for this. I think we are in a very, very early phase trial there, probably, early phase 1 with nanotechnology. So they have just mentioned that there's a possibility of liquid retinal processes. But I guess it's a while before we are going to be able to, see that as a reality.
So, I hope we have covered most of the questions, Dr. Rajni.
Okay.
Yes.
I think this was actually a a good session.
A wonderful session. I take this opportunity to thank all the participants who had attended today, and Dr. Rajni, extremely thank you for making this patient-centric. I am sure many patients have benefited, and they have your email now. They can contact you. We have
so maybe should I just share that last slide? Maybe
yes, ma'am. Please.
I don't know if the system. Let me just see if I can do it.
Right.
I will just get this last slide here. Okay. That's the slide. So that's my email ID.
We are not able to view it.
Really?
I think Anjana may have put it in the chat box in one of the.
Thank you, Anjana.
Yeah, we have it in the chat
been
box.
Extremely helpful.
And also, Mr. Prasanna had typed out your email ID. So I hope the patients have your email ID too as well. Yes, ma'am. No, it is but to. Yeah. Thank you, Anjana. Thank you. So thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us today. Do we have you, ma'am?
Madam, I think you are muted. You are muted.
Yeah, she has.
I was muted and off the video. So, okay, so I'm saying that I hope this was a useful session because with the current pandemic, I'm not able to see a lot of them. So hopefully this was, useful.
It was a wonderful session, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I would also like to thank the back-end team of ORDI who's worked so relentlessly for this webinar to be a huge success.
Thank you, all of you guys. And good evening to most of you. There are a couple of you whom it's good afternoon, and I see someone good morning. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, madam.
Thank you, Swami. Thank you, Swapna.